Greetings. I'm Erica Diamond, Assistant Director of Galleries for the Chautauqua Visual Arts at Chautauqua Institution. I'm here today to introduce you to three artists who are part of our current exhibition, Devil is in the Details, which is an exhibition featuring 8 very talented alumni from our Chautauqua School of Art program. So I'll start by giving you all a brief introduction and then dive in with some poignant questions. Let's start with you, Anna. So Anna Muradyan focuses in oil painting, or at least for this exhibition. She also focuses on color theory and vivid saturated hues to create depictions of Armenian domestic scenes. She holds a BA in art and psychology from UC Davis and is currently, I believe, working on an MA in art therapy and family therapy, which I'd love for you to talk about more later in this conversation. Matt Smith is known to use ceramics, found objects, wood, some other materials, and most recently felt. He often uses his work to speak about his personal history, particularly relating to his religious upbringing. He holds a BA in art education from Anderson University, Indiana, a postbac from Syracuse University, and an MFA from the University of Colorado Boulder. We also happened to miss each other, I think, by 2 weeks at Haystack in 2014. So lots of overlap happening. Taro Takizawa creates prints, drawings, and large-scale vinyl wall installations using detailed repetitive patterning. He explores his connection to his Japanese heritage and also a fascination with water. So you are all a part of this exhibition, The Devil is in the Details. So we know that you're all alumni. I've given a brief introduction to sort of what you look like on paper. But I think the real connective tissue between your works here is this idea of making work that relates to your personal histories, whether that means your upbringing, the culture that you connect to. So I'm interested in hearing more about that. And if you could kind of start by just telling us where you're from. Anna, can we begin with you?
Yeah, so I am from the greater East Bay area, a small town called Oakley, California. Don't know if you would ever have heard of it, but anything else with that?
No, that's okay. I think you can just dive right in and let us know just specifically how you're working with your personal history, your heritage.
Okay. So growing up, I am first generation American Armenian, and I grew up being the only one in my area. So anything that I knew of my culture came straight from my family. Both my parents are from Armenia. Yeah, I didn't really have much of a diaspora that I could connect with that was of my age or anything. Like most of my family is out in the country. So the art that I would make would really just be based on what kind of a connection do I have as I've been living kind of in the middle of nowhere, not really having another source of reference other than just what my parents show me, but then also having this American culture that can kind of clash with the values and teachings that have gone on. So with that, I had a language barrier. I'm still learning the Armenian language. So food was always the one thing that I felt most confident in understanding. So
Universal connector.
yeah, so that's been most of the base of my work. And it's also been a way for me to make food the language that others could understand too. So the work that I would make, it's not really food that they might not recognize, but looks delicious is what I've been told. So it gets into the whole conversation of like, oh, what's this about? Where's this from? Oh, you're okay. And then, yeah, so that's been mostly what that's been about.
So it's like an opportunity for you to, through those details, if you will, of like what's on the table, to talk about your culture and maybe even learn more about it yourself. Yeah, I think that's. And have you been to Armenia? I'm curious if you've been able to.
Yes, I've been 4 times. Last time was right after my time in Chautauqua.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah.
I'm also curious if you have always really made work about that aspect of your life, or if this was something that kind of hit you at a certain time in your life. Um, yeah.
So this emerged during my undergrad years when I was in Davis. I know because I did the dual major in art and psychology, and I don't know, just like anything that I was doing in my art classes, I just wasn't feeling very connected to it. Like I would make things that I felt were cool or pretty or whatever, but where was that part of me that was like, oh, what's in this still life? You know, like what am I getting out of this exercise? I had one assignment where I had to paint people just like in a domestic scene. Like, so it was off of a photo of my auntie eating at a table. And then after that, I was like having this realization like, wait, like I was using photo references from my times that I visited Armenia. So that was something where I was like, oh, like I'm really ramped up doing this.
Yeah,
I was a little homesick back then too, because I moved out back then. So it was just kind of like that way to reminisce back on my cultural connection.
I love it.
Mhm.
And I want to get back to that, but I also want to let Matt respond next. If you could just give us a brief where you're from and how you speak about personal histories in your work.
Sure. So I'm from a small town called Wabash, Indiana, which is probably even more off the map than Oakley, but I'm not sure. Uh, and mine was it's interesting because Anna, you're talking about kind of being from somewhere and then having these little wisps of culture come through in the food and family and stuff like that. And I feel like my story is so ubiquitous to the Midwest, like lower middle class kid who rode his bike everywhere. And I feel like so many people were like me, my friends, we were all the same people doing the same things. In the heart of the Midwest, there's a lot of conservative Christianity, and so I was raised in a very, very religious household that kind of put faith first. And so I don't know, I didn't think that story was ever very interesting, and I think it's because I saw a lot of people around me have a very similar story. And at some point in grad school, in fact, there was a film I watched that had a turning point. It was a film about Pentecostal religion, which my great grandfather was a Pentecostal preacher, and my grandmother was a Pentecostal preacher. And it came back in this very real, weird way where they're like, hey, what we had was like, that was really real. And I, at that point, I would have considered myself an atheist probably at that point, and kind of moved away from my Christian upbringing. And so seeing that like just brought it back full force. And I was like, how many people have grandmothers who are Pentecostal preachers? That's kind of weird. Like I saw my great aunt speak in tongues, which if you don't know what that is, it's kind of this the spirit speaking through someone, and it's a very bizarre experience, and it's something that I also kind of felt was unique. So I started within that small town environment through my own memories, whether that's fishing or thinking about baptisms and water, which go directly with the felt pieces that are in the show. I started seeing some of that background as something that might actually be a little unique, and I at least wanted to ruminate on it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. And so you've used this technique of felt storyboards to tell these stories, these maybe just like images from your everyday life, things that you've experienced or heard about. Can you explain why you use that method?
Yeah, so the felt storyboard, and I don't know if this goes outside of religion. I assume it does, but the way that I was introduced to it was in church. We would have these felt storyboards. It was a simple way that like kids could play with the story, which is kind of interesting because it's one way to educate people in church that like this is the story and this is how it happened.
Yeah.
But then there's this kind of playful factor of like, well, you get to take Jesus and put him over here and do that, and put the wise men
Sort
over
of
here.
irreverent, maybe.
Take it up. You can do remixes. And so I was kind of pulling off of that, but at the same time, I kind of spoke of my great grandfather, who I actually never met, but he was a maker in his own right. He would make really oddball things like pocket knives with Bible verses, or fishing bobbers, which he would scrawl, different verses on as well.
Yeah.
And so I found that kind of outsider. There was something when I saw those pieces again, and I like reinvited some of that back into my life, that there was something so potent. I guess like a power object would be the closest thing, that like these objects that my great grandfather had made had such a force to them that in the middle of grad school, I gave up like everything I was doing, turned towards something completely different, which was the familial work, because I'd never actually really dealt or worked with any of that before.
Mm.
And the storyboards seemed like something, one, it's something I'd never done. And so I was interested, I'm still very interested, as kind of a theory or philosophy of making, of what it means to be an amateur. And I like that one of the things that I came up against was like, how do I make something as authentic, which I know is like kind of a stupid word, but I still kind of like it. How do you make something as authentic as like what my great grandfather made? And I don't know that I can. He wasn't trying too hard. And I think the felt storyboards for me were simply a way to come up next to a material and a process that I don't feel competent in, which is part of the reason that it has kind of this folky look to it.
Yeah.
In fact, it might look like kind of ham-handed or just not good. And I'm kind of interested in like that, but like if I have to try really hard to get the material to do what I want it to do, I think there's going to be some kind of authenticity infused in that as well.
Well, maybe it has something to do with this idea of maybe accessibility, like the accessibility of food as a universal language, the accessibility of like a DIY process, like, you know, cutting and gluing felt. A lot of textile processes sort of have that aspect to them that make them more accessible. And so maybe, and I'm just hypothesizing, but maybe it becomes more about like less about the process and more about the idea. Like we don't have to talk about the history of felt. You know, it's like what are these images? And but it also, I think with the felt maybe makes it somewhat more tangible, and you know, in not knowing your great grandfather, this work is very tangible, whereas that relationship isn't. I think it's very interesting how both of you, Anna and Matt, are kind of sort of connecting to your ancestors in some way, and trying to like pay homage to them. Taro, I think you use very different methods, and your aesthetics, really all three of you, super different, but you wrote a little bit in your artist statement about how these processes you use, and even the kind of topic of water, are a way for you to kind of connect, learn about your own Japanese heritage. Can you speak more about that? And tell us where you're from, literally.
Yes, totally. So I'm born and raised in Japan, and I basically moved over here or came over here to get into college. So I started right after high school, and then I moved here and I went to Central Michigan University. And I think it took me a little while to kind of like actually go for the decision of getting into art and like becoming an art major, and then meeting printmaking and pursuing BFA. But I think a lot of the questions, surprisingly, I got were from my colleagues, like my classmates and friends, were what's it like in Japan, in Michigan, like it's Midwest, and back in the early 2000s, it's like there were less information probably about, or like people probably wouldn't travel that far. So I had to kind of like introduce them or educate them, or but then at the same time, I was struck how less that I was paying attention when I, was in Japan and growing up, because, as a teenager, you kind of care about only things that really matters in, friends and school life and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I had to like do some research and like rediscover I guess like my culture and history, which was very interesting. And I started using those ideas in my BFA work, which is more, I was drawn towards more of maybe 16th, 17th century architecture, prints and paintings, so other arts and craft. And I was picking up a lot from the patterns they use in especially textile design and stuff, or ornaments on like armor, and then or the repeated pattern on some of the architecture, and I started using those. And soon, well, not soon, but it sort of started becoming a little cliche. But so towards the end of my undergrad, I would start thinking about, okay, how can I transition from these representational approach to something a little more fluid for me? And I was always thinking about, I wanted to do something a little more faster. And, you know, in terms of production, I was taking too long to produce a work, and I wanted to speed up the process and be efficient. And I also wanted to expand in a scale. So I slowly made this transition from representation to more like abstracted, repeated lines and patterns, which allowed me to go work a lot quicker and be very intuitive in the process. And so I sort of stopped doing like multi-layer or crazy amount of layer, like relief printing, for example. I've been doing 2 or 3 layers, but nothing too much.
It's interesting that you say that, because when I look at your work, you know, I think people are instantly drawn to like the detail, the line, that repeating line and sort of building pattern, which doesn't feel fast. So it's interesting that you actually feel like you're able to kind of get, you know, the workout more quickly than you were before, and yet still have like that same visual sensibility. So apart from this idea of looking at your histories, you each kind of specify something that you're looking at in a very significant way. So I wanted to kind of lob that out. So Taro, you seem to kind of fixate on water as a source of inspiration. Anna, equally as important as water is food. And then Matt, you talk, at least, or your writing about your work involves this idea of place. So with those ideas in mind, as a kind of jumping off point, how do you feel like those ideas, or even just talking about your histories, how can that relate to maybe this idea of like the personal being political? And so maybe you don't think that way about water, but I bring it up just mainly because now I think we're in a time when, you know, we're sort of in crisis globally. I think some people are like, why am I even making art right now? But I think there's great importance to, you know, what we're all researching and what we're all trying to talk about. And maybe if we look at it as sort of important and political, it helps us to kind of continue going on and continue making. I mean, making is sort of getting me through all of this right now. I don't know about you guys. So it's like 5 questions in one, but but Anna, maybe we can start with you again and kind of chew on this idea of the personal as political, especially with your subject matter being about Armenian culture. And like, why is that important to share that with people? What do you want them to take away?
So going back to that whole narrative of, usually whenever people meet me, I tend to be the first Armenian they ever meet. And then they have no idea about our culture, where the country is even located. Going back to when I had even researched anything about Armenian history, I remember one of the titles of a book, can't remember the author's name, but the title was called Starving Armenians. And it was regarding Armenian genocide survivors from 1915, when the Ottoman Turks killed 1.5 million of us. And the last thing I want to be identifying as is a victim. So I feel like anything that I've been making from this point on has just been that resilience story, that showing of like, you know, through the ashes, like we've risen. And it's been a constant thing going on. For anyone else that didn't know, starting from late September of 2020 up to early November, we had a 40-day war. It was pretty much a racial thing regarding Azerbaijan and Turkey. Armenia is in between 2 countries that don't like us since the beginning of history. And so the survival of our people is a huge thing. So anything that I make, I could see that always being a political thing. Like, you're not going to get rid of us. We're still here. Cultural erasure is still a huge thing over there right now. They're calling Armenian churches in the Artsakh region Albanian.
Oh,
There's like, oh, you'd have to read into that, but it's just like they're trying to pretend like we weren't in this area before. And so going back to the art that I make and having it be like at least something tangible for those that are non-Armenian to at least learn about the culture a little bit and get way more and more into our history and traditions and all. I feel like that's like the first step into it, at least like knowing who we are and where we're at and that we exist. And though we have this like rough history, like we still rise strong.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, especially for a culture that's been attempted, eradication, to just have visibility feels plenty political. And I think the use of food really drives the point home too, just as, food as a thing that sustains life. Like, we're here, and to celebrate just like daily life, I think is really powerful. So Matt or Taro, which yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I can jump in. Just because I think there might be a small thread that works, because I was really interested in those pieces and in this work where I was trying to kind of again just reflect on what it meant to come of age with religion as a center point, and the religion's obviously a big conflict for lots of groups of people. But kind of what Anna was saying, like there's people over here looking at us and they have a very specific stance and understanding of us. These people over here have a completely different one. I mean, that's kind of the center part of war, right? Is that there's that disconnect that kind of grinds, and sometimes those things aren't able to come back together. In the body of work that I was working on, I was interested if I could speak about kind of lowercase f faith, just this idea of like believing in something that you can't see. And if I could talk about church as an agnostic person, and if I could create a work that my super conservative Christian mom would shake her head and be like, oh, I see that. I kind of like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also my super atheist college graduate professor at a critique being like, interesting.
Right.
And I found it to be, and that grind was actually so present that it became kind of a quest as I made these bodies of work to be like, no, okay, I want to hone it in almost to like a little bit more ambiguity. Like I don't want there to be this binary. I don't want somebody to be able to fall on one side and be able to say yes, and one person be able to fall on the other side and say absolutely not.
Right.
But it was really hard, especially at the academic level, to get some people to respond to anything that might be Christian or faith oriented, even just kind of talking about those stories or seeing certain kinds of symbols, a cross, for instance, and just saying, oh, wait, that's something like, that's a world I don't touch, I don't know anything about, and I don't want to be, or I do know something about it, and I don't want to be a part of it. And I also want to be clear not to excuse, some of the issues that have come up in especially Christianity towards any number of group of people, and the kind of oppression that say the Bible has been used to, start wars here or all over the world, or the cultural wars in America. I mean, there's plenty of that as well. But I'm kind of curious, like, is there little gems of humanity in any of this that we can like let rise to the top, and we can both say for once that like, okay, I can get on board a little bit with this.
It's very uplifting.
I don't know if it works, but
no, but I think that's, I mean, to kind of, to use your practice in a way to try to just connect people. That's like one thing that you as an artist can do, even if it's perhaps a polarizing topic. So I think that's admirable. Taro, do you kind of respond to this idea too of the personal is political? I mean, I think you can kind of we could say by just sharing your culture as a way of maybe educating those that you were around, is maybe one way of being political, but you don't have to agree with that.
Right. I sort of think about my work as, or like how I'm fascinated by water, or kind of like leads to like just appreciation for nature and what they create, and how amazing they are. And then I was sort of like stopping there for quite a long time, and then I start thinking about what have we been doing as a human species to our Earth, our like environment in general. I started paying a little more attention, started like watching documentaries and reading books about some of the damage we've been doing, and it's
Yeah.
simply terrifying to kind of like think about what's going on. And there's positive stuff that's happening and going on as well. There's a lot of efforts, but then I think a lot of times my head goes towards all the negative stuff that's really I guess like devastating. And I think I'm thinking a little more about how can um I guess like carry this idea about maybe like saving the planet. So that's one thing that I've been doing, or like at least like thinking and reading about.
So next, I'd like to ask how all of you are trying to stay connected to other people right now. Taro?
Yes. So what was I gonna say? At the when everything started, I would say March. It sounds like so a long time ago. I was still busy with the semester and like trying to rapidly move online and like figure things out last minute for the rest of the few weeks for the semester. So I kept myself busy with that. But once the summer break hit, and once I felt I was like mentally rested a little bit, me and my friends started this weekly Zoom drawing sessions.
Very
Just
cool.
like people, log in and hang out for a couple hours and draw together. Sometimes we're really chatty. Sometimes we're kind of like nice and quiet and just doing our own things.
Mhm.
But I was able to connect with or reconnect with some other artist friends, old friends, someone that I only knew on social media were able to hang out. And I thought that was really nice to,
Yeah.
see each other through a computer screen, but
Which
definitely
you
be
might
able to.
not have done maybe before. It just, everyone's sort of at the same rate of accessibility with Zoom
Yes.
now. So,
Yeah. So I guess it's not for everyone. Like people sort of like came and go, and like there were a few core members sort of like stuck, and we continued that throughout the summer. And I had to leave when the semester was starting because I was getting really, really busy just to prep. And but some of my friends continue, I think, throughout the fall as well. But I think there was a lot of online events. I'm sure both of you guys, all of you guys can speak about this too, that I tried to take advantage of as well. When I had time, you know, fear of missing out was a real thing. So like I sort of started registering for a whole bunch of different things, and I was
yeah.
thinking, oh, wait a minute, I don't have the time to do all these.
Right.
But the online platform sort of like gave me a really good, I guess, way to like reach out to people that I sort of like know their work.
Yeah.
So Instagram also helped me a lot to kind of like stay connected with what people are doing, even though we don't, like my friends, we don't get to see each other. And discovering all the other artists through virtual artist talks and whatnot.
I think that's a great tip actually to give other people to just, like just send someone an Instagram message, see if they want to reconnect or connect for the first time. do a virtual studio visit. I mean, it is funny how time has worked in a funny way where you're like, you have nowhere to be, but you're super busy. Like, well, I have to cook my 3 meals a day and do all the dishes and, weed the garden. And how am I supposed to go to all these Zoom meetings? But I think we're all kind of readjusting and finding new ways to just keep things going along. Anna, how about you?
Ways that I've been keeping connected. I was going to say, so March was when I was in the middle of my spring semester. So we watched our school transition from being in person to having to do everything online. So I know Zoom was like that huge introduction and just like at least being able to have that. Connecting with friends more, Instagram has been like a huge thing for me.
Nice. Yeah.
And I think because you can like post a lot with like personal messages and like your like close friends group on the stories and all, and that was like the way to at least like try to make up for not being able to see everyone in person. And I've been having a lot of friends like reach out that I haven't spoken to in years that have been like just popping back up on there. I think just also because it's a visual platform too.
Right.
I'm a very visual person. I like my images more than my words, so that's kind of what I do in my work. So getting into that, I've even been doing art therapy sessions with my current internship through Zoom. That's been the only way I can connect with my patients in the square.
Yeah. What a way to start.
Yeah. It's the least I could do. But going back to the Armenian community and the war that had gone on, I had never been so connected to the Armenian diaspora as a whole until we were all getting together trying to find ways to fundraise.
Wow.
So I started a print sale. I was just selling like little postcard size prints of my work, $5 each. I would have people donate way more than $5. And there would just be so many people. I'm like sending art to different people in like Midwest, East Coast, not just Los Angeles, because we have a huge diaspora there.
Yeah.
So I now have followers that would message me like, hey, how are you? Like, I still have your art hanging in my room somewhere.
That is so great. That's so great. Matt, how about you?
Yeah, I'm all over the place with community. You know this, Erica, but I made a cross-country move in August from Colorado to West Virginia. And
Big move.
I know one person in West Virginia.
Wow.
But so community, I'm a big face-to-face person. I think a lot of us are, although I'd probably consider myself more on the extroverted side of things. And so it's been hard. And I work currently at Marshall University, where I'm a faculty member, and I think at least half the faculty I haven't seen face to face since I saw them back in March when I came for an interview. So there's parts of that like I want that adult connection. I know that might sound silly, but like I do see my students face to face. I teach all my classes face to face right now. And I really enjoy that, but I also want the casual thing again. I think we all do. But, and it's just because both of you guys talked about Instagram a little bit. I feel like I went down the bad quarantine rabbit hole of just like too much time on my phone and too much time in Instagram. And I actually just took Instagram off my phone like 3 days ago. And it's the first time it's kind of weird, but it's the first time I've ever done that, probably since 2010. Like when I first got it, I don't know. But so it's always been something there. And I just found that I was like connecting, but not really conversing, which it sounds like you guys have done a better job of like the conversing part. But I just found like myself getting little tidbits of like, oh, that felt good. And then I was like, but it wasn't something that would last for me. And it's kind of a new experiment, I guess, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I think we're all adjusting at our own pace and like finding out what works for us. And some of us are like, I could just stay home all day in the studio and not, have to do anything else or, log in for work. But I think we're all sort of discovering where our comfort levels are. And so I'm interested next in finding out more about how this other community, the Chautauqua community, how that's played a role in your lives kind of for the long term. One of the reasons we wanted to put this exhibition on was because we have such a growing, vibrant community of alumni who are a part of this program. And it's really our way of just letting you know that we want to stay connected, and we want to see where your work goes, and to let you know that you are your own community. So I'm curious, some people who are watching this might remember you, they might not have had a chance to meet you. And there might be people who don't know much about the program but are considering going. So is there anything that you could say kind of about your experience there that that you felt kind of helped you moving forward, or important takeaways from your experience there? Matt?
Sure. Mine's like weirdly a very clear line, which is kind of cool. I can see people behind me, like a painter in my undergrad named Kathleen Dugan. She was somebody who just she's the kind of educator I would love to be, who is just like, you need to go to this thing called Chautauqua, just go. And I wouldn't consider myself, especially at the time, like a good artist. I think I was super mediocre. And yet she was like, no, you have to do these other things to get there. And so I went in 2007, right out of undergrad.
Yeah.
And it was a really amazing experience. It was the first thing that felt like an artist residency, and like, oh, I don't even have to do schoolwork. I just get to do art.
Yeah.
And that was a really powerful motivator. And then I had a very weird opportunity to come back for a second time when my partner at the time went to the theater program. And so I came back in 2012. And at that point I had taught, my degree was in art education. So I taught for 6 years in elementary art schools, and programs there. And so coming back I was right at the moment where I was like, okay, I think I need to do something. The teaching felt less challenging at the elementary level. I was like, I really want to go back to this art thing. And so that was the perfect way back in. And I think we'll probably all attest to this, but there is a certain network that's built there.
Yeah.
And that network took me to Syracuse with my postbac. And then that person sent me off somewhere else and sent me off somewhere else. And to come full circle, the committee that hired me here at Marshall, one of those people in there was somebody that I had met at Chautauqua. And I worked with at Chautauqua. And he wasn't someone, we hadn't talked, we talked a little bit in those years, but not a lot. And he had sent me this thing just saying, hey, we have this job opportunity, send it out to anyone you want to. And I kind of applied and then ended up getting it. But of course, that connection, just knowing that you trust someone and that you've worked with them in some kind of capacity before is really interesting. So like looking where I am now goes all the way back to Chautauqua and through. It feels almost like too good of a Chautauqua story. Like everything's kind of lined up through a Chautauqua lens for me.
You like that.
But it's kind of a beautiful thing. And the network, even talking to you guys right now and like talking about art and seeing some faces is a really wonderful thing. But being able to see the mentors in my life have somehow come through those doors. I don't know. It's really exciting.
Yeah. Well, and also people might remember you, not just as a student, but you were there as in working with the ceramics program as well as a technician. I don't remember the title that you had at the time.
Yeah.
That's when I met you. You were
yes,
helping the students there too. So, which has been interesting to see how you can kind of grow into different roles there. And as one who knows what the experience is like, then share that with kind of the next group of people.
Yeah.
So I think that's great. Taro, how about you?
I think, I've been thinking about how can I say this. It's been a very interesting. After it's like there's this like before Chautauqua and after Chautauqua in me, where I guess like my group of artist friends like grew rapidly through Chautauqua, because you have your cohort at the year, which a lot of people went off to grad school and finished grad school at that point. So I've been really enjoying seeing those people like progress in their career. Some became pretty known as an emerging artist, which is very exciting as well. I get to go back. I can't remember who it was the following year to participate in a steamroll
Yeah.
printing event as part of the I think those prints were part of the silent auction or something.
Mhm.
So it was nice to kind of like go back the next year and reconnect. I was there for like what, maybe, yeah, I can't remember. Was it a day or something? Like a really short stay.
Yeah, I mean, that we had a whole event with where we did the steamroller prints,
Hmm.
right? And then it was part of the gala and auction for the gala, which supports the students in the end, really. So
Yeah, and I get to meet some of the at that moment art Chautauqua, like the School of Art students as well, and some I still follow them because like they're obviously some of them are in the print world, and those are the people I follow the most. So um and then there was there are like alum shows like this one. There was another one before that I participated. And then interestingly, Sharon, the current director, I met her before Haystack, where she was a keynote speaker, I think, and I get to meet her and spend time in her workshop. And then so I've been following her separately, but then all of a sudden like these like Chautauqua and her like merged
yeah,
recently. So
yeah.
I've been following Chautauqua like in the events and like what kind of students are coming in like every year.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, but that's how I've been like sort of connected.
Yeah, that's great. Anna, your
Uh,
Chautauqua experience?
my Chautauqua experience was during a time when I literally just graduated undergrad. I was trying to figure out what career move I wanted to make. So I was very torn between, do I want to do an MFA or do
Mhm.
I want to do a master's in art therapy? And I was getting like so many mixed signals from professors because I'll be honest with you, my professors back in Davis, they really wanted me to do an MFA. And I was like, but I still like to talk to people and it's a completely different world. So my time in Chautauqua, like it was great. I remember like learning a lot.
Mhm.
But it did show me that I was missing something that I really wanted, which was to be working with people and helping them.
Yeah.
So, because it's one thing with in the MFA stance, okay, like we create art and we have critiques, but I love the emotions that come out of the art making process.
Right.
I don't like critiquing people personally. And that was coming out of me more and more. I'm like, no. And,
Right.
you know, I see it like in my work with my patients now, like they'll talk to me, they think I'm an art teacher. And I'm like, no, I'm not here to make you like create like nude portraits that have to be super symmetrical and everything. I care about the feelings that come out when you're making this and how it helps you. And, you know, my time in Chautauqua, like I was having times where, you know, my feelings were hurt. Like I would hear critiques.
Critique.
But I would also have a lot of professors that heard me out too and understand like where I'm coming from. So um, it was just kind of like a question of my values. Like, what do I want to do after this? I'm still glad I went. It was also the first time I was ever in New York. I barely left the Bay Area. So um, a lot of experiences that I needed happened
Yeah.
there. So
Well, so it allowed for some self-discovery, and it sounds like you're all kind of landing where you need to be, or headed in a very specific direction. And I can just say personally, it's been an honor to learn about all of your work, and your practices, and what your interests are, and to share that with our community. So I just want to thank you for being here and for being a part of Devil is in the Details. And I'll direct everyone to the website, art.chq.org, where you can view these works by Anna, Taro, and Matt, as well as other alumni from the Chautauqua School of Art. So thank you all for being here.